Good morning, everyone. I'm Mariska Zandvliet, and it is my absolute pleasure to be here today as the first speaker during the Circular Textile Days. Welcome. I hope you've been able to grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea. Being the first one also makes that I still have you awake and sharp, so I'm trying to keep it like that for the next 20 minutes. Today I'm going to take you to, actually, what we like to call the Brussels bubble sometimes, and explain a little bit how EU policy can drive circularity in textiles. Before we do that, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about myself, my background, and also where my passion for recycling textiles is coming from. As I said, Mariska Boer, actually. Boer Group is our family company. We have been recycling textiles for 4 generations. Started first as a very small-scale operation. My great-grandfather actually was going by the houses door to door to see what clothing people would like to discard. And in order to sort that for reuse initially, and later also recycling. Boer Group has now developed into an organization with 14 different companies. We are active throughout Europe, one of the leading recycling organizations in Europe. And on a year basis, we collect 110 million kilos of used textiles, so post-consumer textiles, which would otherwise become waste. So we actually save them from the waste. Well, due to the fact that I was born in textiles, you could say it that way, I also now have the pleasure to lead the European Textile Recycling Association, which is EuRIC Textiles. And that's the hat I have on this morning. So let me tell you a little bit more about EuRIC Textiles. EuRIC Textiles is part of EuRIC. And EuRIC is the European Recycling Confederation. We have multiple waste streams, actually, in the association, of which textiles is one. Textiles was founded, a branch, 2 years ago. Currently, we have 14 members of 12 different countries. So we act as trusted interface between post-consumer textile recyclers, traders, and the EU. And also, of course, we advocate the interest of the European textile reuse and recycling industry. In simple words, we try to take the policymakers by the hand, inform them about our industry, what we are already doing, but also try to guide them a little bit in all their wisdom in making the measurements and the policy. Coming back to recycling textiles, that's what we're all here for. Why is this so important? I think to assess that, we need to look at the greater scope of things, maybe, and look firstly at the consumption of new textiles. For me, it was also mind-blowing that I read some months ago, this has doubled in the last 2 decades. So at the moment, we have a situation where more than 150 billion garments are flooding the earth each year. So under influence of what we all know, the phenomenon fast fashion, people are buying more clothing. I think there are more collections even than there are months in a year currently. So people are constantly triggered to buy new clothing. So this is why the consumption has doubled. Of course, when you buy something new, unless you want your closet to fill up really extensively, you also have to discard clothing. So the pile of post-consumer textiles has also been growing in the same way that the consumption has. So there's clearly a need to reuse and recycle. On the one hand, the growing pile of post-consumer textiles that are discarded. Also, when we look at the production of new textiles, we see that it has a huge environmental impact. The global textile industry, as it reads here, has a greenhouse emission of 2.1 billion tons every year. That is equivalent to actually Germany, France, and the UK combined. It is also much more than maritime shipping and aviation. While aviation has a name because we see an airplane and we go, oh, there goes CO2 emission, and we can, well, not currently, but we could buy an extra price on our ticket to compensate for that. And fashion doesn't have that image at all, but I think it is a serious problem. Even more when you consider that at the moment less than 1% of the textiles are actually recycled into new fibers. So this is something from our point of view, from EuRIC Textiles' point of view, but definitely also from our company's point of view, that we have to change, and we have to change that as soon as possible. So we know this, and I think most of you here are also aware of these issues. Policymakers have also seen that, and they have started to make a policy on that. And I'd just like to take you into the whole picture of that. I think you're all familiar with the Green Deal. Frans Timmermans, of course, that we all know quite well also here, has designed that. And that was also for multiple waste streams, of course, to increase recycling and to make sure the waste problem would be under control in 2050, when we want a fully circular economy. So within the Green Deal, we have the Circular Economy Action Plan. There are several things that are prioritized in this action plan. One is targets for recycled content. Again, this is not only textiles, but also for plastics, for glass, for paper. Also EU markets for secondary raw materials. Simplified waste shipment procedures intra-EU to make sure that we make optimized use of the infrastructure that we already have within the EU for collecting and recycling. And last but not least, to introduce eco-design criteria for reuse, repair and recycling. I will go on further that later in the presentation. Then coming to textiles. Textiles is not glass, and textiles is not paper. Textiles is maybe a little bit like plastic, you hear sometimes say, but from my point of view, textiles is far more complicated to recycle than actually any other material. Luckily, policymakers also saw that, so they said, okay, textiles we need to look at separately, and they are currently writing on a sustainable strategy on textiles that was supposed to be published beginning of this year, but due to Corona it moved to the summer, and now we are somewhere in December. So we hope by the end of this year there will be a sustainable strategy on textiles, and within this strategy we hope it will be a framework for multiple EU member states to design their own national policy, basically. So policy and practice, I always like that to make that combination, because policy can sound really perfect. I mean, solution solving sometimes, and then you put it into practice and, well, it doesn't always work that way. But where does it start? I think if we're talking about policies, then we also need to have a set of harmonized terms and definitions. So this is where the fun part of the presentation starts, because I'm going to throw a little quiz at you. I mean, you're here anyway, so we might as well do that. Just to make sure that we are all speaking the same language. When we have these terms and definitions in mind, we speak about it. What do we mean? So I'm just going to start with the first one, post-industrial textiles. I'm sure that's no secret for anyone here. So anyone have any ideas here? And if it is, then I'm really happy to be here too, because I'm telling you something new. No ideas? No hands? No? Some idea? You have an idea?
Post-industrial, so that will be leftovers in the factory from cutting? Or
yes, yes. It's very correct. Don't be shy. No, it's very correct. Those are in fact, textiles that are left after the industrial process and that have not passed on to the consumer phase. They can also be, for instance, dead stock, clothing that's not sold, for instance, is also considered post-industrial textiles. Then post-consumer textiles, I must see one hand now. That is, of course, after the consumer phase, when the textiles and the clothing have been worn or used. I think the biggest difference is that in the post-consumer textiles, you will find a much greater variety. As I always say, people sometimes have the idea that in the textile bin we find clothing or household textiles. But believe me, we find anything and everything the consumer thinks has anything to do with textiles. In Corona times, we even saw an ironing board next to the containers. So there's, of course, shoes, there's accessories, there's bags, all sorts of things in there. So it's not only textiles. I think mechanical textile recycling should not be a secret to anyone here either. But I do want to see someone answer here. No. Yes, thank you.
So the textiles are received and then there's shredding involved.
Yeah.
turned into pulp eventually within
Yeah.
what was used to be.
Yeah, yeah. That's very correct. Thank you. Thank you for that definition. That's true. It's a fiberization process, industrial process, where the textiles are shredded. The complexity with that is, at the moment still, that the fibers that you get out of the mechanical recycling process are relatively short, and they're not spinnable fibers yet. Yet, I say yet. I do have very great hopes for the future. Of course, chemical textile recycling is also a lot of development and innovation there. It's basically the step after mechanical recycling. Downcycling is mechanical recycling into all sorts of sustainable applications. For instance, let's see, car parts, covers of your motor block or something like that, but also isolation materials is an example of that. And then circularity in textiles. You know, circularity in textiles, for me, is at 1%. It's really that 1%. When we achieve to actually recycle recycled fibers into new garments, I think then we really have a circular system. When you talk to politicians, any effort to sustainabilize the textiles, so even if it's downcycling, it's also considered circular. So that sort of depends on who you are speaking to. You had a question?
Well, I just on circularity in textiles, I would want to suggest that circularity in textiles doesn't mean just one recycling process, that there has the ability for that product to then go through the recycling processes multiple times.
Yes, yes, that's even, yes, I agree with you.
Mechanically recycle, that's recycling, you know, where you at least get one extra loop, but I would suggest that you want to have multiple loops.
Yeah, you want to keep going, basically. That's, yeah, that should be the ambition. Very true. Okay, so not to make this... Yeah, I didn't put all of them on there. I put the main one. I only have 20 minutes with 7 left, so... but you're right, that also should be on there. So policy and practice. Not to make this a very boring theoretical presentation, what I've basically done is I've looked at several stages in the post-consumer textile chain and their essentials. So what happens when we are discarding textiles and what is needed for optimized reuse and recycling after. So discarding textiles, that's step one. We need to collect them. And we need to collect them also separate from other waste streams. That's very important. Like I said, textiles do have quite a high value inside. And the unique thing compared to other waste streams is that 50% on average can be reused, but on a condition that they're treated well from the beginning. So if they're mixed, for instance, with paper or with plastics, that immediately brings down the value and also the possibilities to reuse the textiles in the waste stream. So that's very important. Luckily, EU policymakers have seen that. So from 2025, all EU member states will be obliged to have a separate collection system for textiles. So we're happy that that's one check. That's good. Then when they are collected, by whom they are collected, they need to be properly handled. So make sure that they're also, for instance, not getting wet. And that's also a killer for textiles. So we would advise EU quality standards. They can be incentivized by the NEN or the CEN in Europe. And they can also be found in the handling and sorting specifications from EuRIC Textiles, which we published actually 2 weeks ago. Also, like I said before, we have to make full use of the infrastructure that we already have within the EU. And we also need to expand that. With the 2025 mandatory separate collection, it is expected by 2029, so in 4 years, the total amount of textiles collected within the EU will will be more than doubled, 5.5 million kilos. So that's huge, and we also need to expand actually our collecting and sorting infrastructure to be able to handle that in a good way. Once textiles are collected, I keep stressing this, it's very important that we follow the waste hierarchy. I think when trying to manage any waste problem, this is really essential. So reuse comes before recycling. Again, textiles have a very high percentage that can be reused. So the first step should be sorting for reuse to make sure that everything of value is just brought on a second-hand market, be it local or international. It should be customized for that second-hand market to make sure that the clothing is worn again or the textiles are used again. If that's not possible anymore, then we have to look at recycling options, of course, and we are doing that increasingly at the moment. But I think we also have to realize that recycling at the moment, textile recycling, is economically not working. So it's costing money to recycle textiles. Reuse, of course, that's preparing it, sorting it for second-hand markets, and that of course brings a revenue. Last, recovery and disposal. So when we have collected the textiles and we are sorting them, we look for reuse. From EU policy point of view, it would be really good if we can restore the intrinsic quality of textiles. That's a little bit of a difficult sentence, but what we've seen under influence of fast fashion is that the quality of clothing has gone down. I don't think I'm telling anyone any secrets when you buy an H&M €2 t-shirt and you wash it 3 times, then it's not really fit to be reused again by someone else. So for that, we could use eco-design criteria set in the EU to improve durability and longevity. And that could, for instance, be embedded in an EPR framework. We need targets for reuse to make sure that the sorting is done in a professional way and that it's strengthened. Also here, same as with the collecting system, we could also use EU quality standards for the sorting process. And the last one is to ensure the revenue of reuse to finance recycling. As I explained earlier, good morning, good morning. Recycling is not cost effective at the moment, so the system, the industry needs still the revenues from reuse to finance the sustainable processing of items which are not suitable to be reworn or reused. Then, final stage, at least the last stage I'm going to talk about here. When we start recycling textiles, there's definitely some steps that still need to be taken there. And I think from a policy point of view, it would be very helpful if we would have targets for recycling. So not only when you reuse, but also when you start recycling to have targets there. That will strengthen the current mechanical and chemical recycling methods. We need to stimulate innovation and technology to improve the quality of the recycled fiber. There's actually 2 reasons why textile recycling is not working at the moment. One is that we still have quality issues with the recycled fibers. They're getting better, we're getting there, but there are still some quality issues. And 2 is the economics. So also here, when we want to stimulate innovation and technology, we also need the eco-design criteria to improve recyclability. What do I mean by that? We actually would like designers, even in the design phase, to start thinking about the recyclability of the items they design at that stage. And not only think about how it looks and how it will sell, but also how it will recycle at the end of the lifespan. Now, and then the last issue with that is, like I said, the economics. We need to enable economically feasible business models for recycling. To do that, a mandatory use of recycled content for producers might be a solution, part of a solution. I know that from our end of the chain, let's put it that way, we have been really pushing recycled content, but we have not seen any pull yet. So we believe that if there's a mandatory use of recycled content, like also introduced by the Dutch circular policy program, this would really get the wheel going and also make it economically feasible to recycle textiles. And increase for demand for recycled content. That's what I was just talking about. Oh, 18 seconds, oh my God. The most important thing, really. I mean, and I honestly believe that. I'm passionate about textiles. Like I said, I was born in textiles. Policy can drive circularity, but cooperation in the textile value chain can realize circularity. And that's why events like this are so important. It's about stakeholders coming together. It's about stakeholders connecting, understanding each other's business, and seeing where they can adapt and change in order to have a circular value chain together. We cannot do it alone as collectors, sorters, and recyclers. We also need you all out there to think along the same lines. And I think together we can definitely realize that. And like I said, I have really good hopes for the future, the near future, that we will achieve a circular textile chain. Thank you very much. Zero. Yeah.
Poses a question. Could you please repeat it? Because I don't...
Oh, they cannot understand it, yeah.
Please. So, two questions?
Yes, 2 questions? Or are there any questions? Okay, well, if something should come up, you know where to find us. We're, we're inside. So, yeah, more than welcome to have a chat after. And yeah, I wish you all... Oh, I see, do see a question. Yeah, sure.
The second-hand market.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how many tons is going there? Because you have the second-hand shop, you have the vintage websites.
Yeah, well, what we do know is that approximately 10% of all textiles that are collected within the EU are actually suitable for the EU market. So for local second-hand shops, that's what we know from the industry that is collecting the post-consumer textiles. The amount of textiles that are traded upon second-hand platforms such as Vinted, etc., there's really no data available for that. So it's interesting and it's growing. We know that. I mean, there's lots of retailers that are also thinking about setting up second-hand platforms. And yeah, this is in the end also stimulating reuse. And as I was explaining, that is really an important step we cannot skip. Any other? Yes?
You mentioned the mandatory use of recycled textile content, and I'm not sure I know what that is.
Okay. Her question was, I mentioned the use of mandatory recycled content, and to explain that a little bit further. What that basically means is that producers of new textile and clothing will be obliged to use, let's say, 10 or 20% recycled content in their new products. From? No, this is something that we propose from EuRIC Textiles to be implemented in an EU framework. If you look in the Netherlands, there's pretty ambitious targets there. I mean, that's I believe it's 25% in 2025 that needs to be inside new textile products. So yeah, but that will get the wheel turning. So I think it's a good thing. All right, I need to finish off. Again, thank you very much. You know where to find me. I'm here all day today and all day tomorrow. And I wish you a very nice time. Enjoy the Circular Textile Days. I certainly will. And I hope to see you all again soon. Thanks.